Well, they're making sure now that they're playing at least somewhat legitimate opponents at a conference, and they're making sure that they're prepared for this tournament. This looks definitely to me like the best team on paper going into this tournament. Honestly, I think they're better than Carolina on paper right now as well. But the thing is it's not going to be easy on them to make it to the tournament final. And unfortunately, we are not talking about the team that they play in the opening game, which is Southern Miss.
Yeah, Southern Miss is kind of like the Chaminade, I guess you would say, of the battle for Atlantis. They come in 2-3 record. They have one guy averaging double figures. His name is Boban Jagdomny, averaging 16.4 points per game. As a team, they shoot 24% from three. So their offensive woes are very well documented. I'm going to be really honest, I don't know anything about Southern Miss. I haven't watched Southern Miss play a basketball game ever. This upcoming week will be the first time I can say I watched Southern Miss play basketball. Remember, I watched them play football back in 2011 because Carolina was hiring Larry Fedora at the time to come be their head coach. Wanted to see what that whack job was going to be all about whenever he got to Chapel Hill. So we'll go ahead and move on to probably the most sexy matchup of the tournament until you would get to the final if you get a Carolina-Gonzaga final. And that's Oregon and Seton Hall. We'll start with Seton Hall.
It's a first-round matchup, by the way. This is two teams that are ranked in the top 15 in the country, and legitimately you could make an argument that both of these teams could make a Final Four run.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is just the way the bracket fell, and you want to have that attractive first game in the tournament, and that's what this game is. Seton Hall, many people picked them to win the Big East. And, this is a program that has really come a long way under their head coach, whose name is now Kevin Willard. I'm a big fan of his, even though his name just slipped my mind. They come in 4-1. Their only loss was to Michigan State at home in the Gavitt tip-off games. And they've got a stud. Miles Powell averaged 22.6 points per game. And he's a guy that can walk around and get 30. And this is the thing about Seton Hall. They play a fun brand of basketball. They get up and down the floor. They want to get the game in the 70s and the 80s. And this is, I think if you're looking at it for Carolina's perspective, you probably match up better with what Seton Hall wants to do. A guy like Miles Powell feels like a guy that could give this Carolina defense a long day. And for me, very intrigued to watch them against an Oregon team. That Oregon is the favorite to win the Pac-12. They come in undefeated. They've already haven't beaten Memphis back in the Phil Knight Invitational back in early November. And now, we all know the hype around Memphis. James Wiseman did play in that game, and Oregon made him pretty much a non-factor. Peyton Pritchard, who's been there for whatever now feels like a decade, averaging 19.4 points a game, 5.6 assists. Thing about Oregon, we know they can put the ball in the basket on offense. They've come a long way defensively under Dana Altman. Even from when we saw them back in the 2017 Final Four, this is a team that in the half court, you don't score on very easily. And it's really propelled their program to take that next step. They made the Sweet 16, of course, last year, I believe, as a 12 seed. And so that Oregon-Seton Hall matchup could very well produce the winner. If not, like you said, both teams could be capable of making the Final Four next April.
The sexiest matchup, maybe of the entire Beast Week, is this matchup right here. Outside of the finals, of course, because you're going to have some higher-seeded teams that are going to meet. But this matchup is great. And you talked about how far Oregon has come defensively, allowing 63.8 a game. Well, Seton Hall ain't much farther behind. They are allowing 64.2. So these teams they're somewhat similar to where they can score at will and they can shut you down. Now they're going to be going against each other. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, Peyton Pritchard, just, a phenomenal player. It's going to be really, really interesting to see him matched up against Miles Powell. They're going to go blow for blow in that game. You would think that both guys will probably come out and have really good performances in those games. Out of those two, I'll admit Miles Powell scares me the most out of those two. He is one of those guys. I'll never forget last year watching the matchup between him and Marcus Howard from Marquette. Just two dudes that could literally 450 in their sleeves. And that's exactly what they did. These are the types of games that Miles Powell looks forward to. The interesting thing and the reason why this matchup, I think, will probably go, I'm going to go with Seton Hall in the matchup, and I think that's, the team that is most dangerous to Gonzaga, is the fact that they run 90. Oregon only runs 60. So, to me, I would rather match up with Oregon because I get what you're saying, that Seton Hall likes to go up and down the floor. That may match up better because we know Carolina's a team that likes to run against, they love when teams say, we're going to try to run against you. But it feels like a team that's not really that deep in Oregon might be the better matchup for this young Carolina team that doesn't have a lot of depth right now than a team in Seton Hall who, the reason they run up and down the floor is because they've got guys that can do it, and they've got a number of them. So, that's the concern for me when it comes to matching up with those two teams. But, look, that side of the bracket, like you mentioned, is unbelievable. There are three teams that you can legitimately see making Final Four runs, at the least Elite Eight runs. There's a real chance that you can look back at this tournament later in the year, and you could find 4 of your Elite Eight teams in this one tournament. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. And that's why, you can make the argument that this is the premier tournament, especially this year in college basketball.
Oh, I would say so, especially now that Michigan State got beat by Virginia Tech to open the Maui Invitational. To me, it's not even close.
Yeah.
I think that this tournament is really that good.
All right, so before we get out of here, I'll ask you this. If Carolina is to win the Battle for Atlantis championship, that final is Friday afternoon on ESPN, what will they have to do successful for 3 days to get the job done?
You hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that consistent number 2 scoring threat has to be there. Not in one game, not in 2. It's got to be all 3 if you're going to come away with a Battle for Atlantis championship. And I think it's possible. Armando Bacot, the last 2 games, has shown me that he has the capabilities to be that number 2 scorer. I thought, offensively he played pretty well against Gardner-Webb. He had those turnover issues that Roy addressed, and he seemed to correct them in the game against Elon. Now, I know that is Gardner-Webb and Elon, but it feels like he realizes that Cole Anthony needs help, and he's the guy that needs to step up. The other thing, Carolina's got to be able to shoot the ball better than they've shot it early in the season. And that doesn't really focus on one guy primarily. That's not saying, Cole Anthony needs to be more efficient from the field. That's not saying that Christian Keeling needs to start getting in a rhythm. Everybody on this team has to shoot better, because you are facing some really, really good offensive teams in this tournament. And it doesn't just start if you get to the finals. It starts in the second game when you face off against either Michigan or Iowa State, 2 teams that are shooting the ball well early in the year. So you've got to get yourself into a rhythm. I think it's definitely possible. But it all starts in the game against Alabama. And like you said, you can't take them lightly. You've got to come out ready to play. 2:30 is a different time to start, but you've got to be ready to go.
I always like when you tell me that I'm right or I hit the nail on the head. It makes me feel a lot smarter as a host.
It's a different effect than you saying that you're hitting the nail on the head, which you tell me all the time. It's a little bit different when somebody else is telling it. But no, you're spot on with that, and I couldn't agree more that this team is, it's very weird because they're in a spot where you feel like they're really close because there is a lot of talent here. It's just they're so young and they're so raw at this point that they're struggling, and it's hard not to be concerned with what we've seen. So,
yeah,
I think we're going to learn. Like I said, we'll learn a lot about this team in these next 3 days.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's why these tournaments are really, the purpose of them is for you to get a gauge at where your team is in early November. The sorry thing is, or the thing that sucks this year, is that most years you get done with this and you go home and you play cupcakes, and Carolina does not do that. They go back home and play Ohio State before going and playing Virginia. So we're going to learn a lot about this team, and then they're going to come back home and apply what they learned over these 3 days and get better, because the schedule doesn't get any easier when they return back to Chapel Hill. We're going to go ahead and wrap this podcast up with our final segment, Beat the Buzzer.
Welcome to Beat the Buzzer.
And I really failed you guys as a host mentioning this on the previous podcast. Our boy B-Rob, although he's been injured, he's been doing a lot of good off the basketball court. He had a donation drive set up for the home game against Elon last Friday for canned goods and really, I guess, any kind of necessity to live life that the team took down with them on their way to the Bahamas to drop off after a hurricane ripped through the islands back early in the summer. Really cool seeing him be very proactive. He was all over Twitter. You even saw Carolina basketball kind of get on there and promote it as well. He was doing it as part, as a project and for a broadcasting class that he's taking. I also like to think, though, that B-Rob is just one of those guys that was just trying to do something nice because he has the ability to help those in need, and it's something that is a value that, Dean Smith taught. Okay, not being, mean here, but you're more privileged than a lot of people are. Use that to your good. This is B-Rob taking advantage of a situation where you play at a high-profile school for basketball, and you can make a lot of good come out of this. So really cool seeing him get that going through, and it was really nice seeing them drop all those goods off on their way down to the Bahamas earlier this week. I want to remind you guys that the second episode of the All Access TV show airs tonight on ACC Network. Make sure you check it out. If you can't watch it live, of course, DVR. It'll be a lot of fun nuggets, as this will be an episode where you've seen what Carolina's done in season mode. First episode was kind of all the stuff in the preseason. Well, now you'll have Cole Anthony's 34 points, the road trip to Wilmington, which was unique, the 2 home games, of course, against Gardner-Webb and Elon. And finally, a little bit of recruiting news for you guys. Carolina offered a 2021 5-star guard, Kenny Chandler. We already know what Carolina's done in the 2020 class. It's loaded. The best recruiting class Roy Williams has had since his early days back in Chapel Hill. And there's, no shortage of talent going to be in Chapel Hill. Carolina's going to be really in play to get Chandler to come play for Carolina. And we'll make sure to follow his recruitment as it progresses for the young man. I do want to thank Anthony for taking some time to come on and talk a little Carolina basketball on this holiday week. It's going to be a fun week of basketball. It's also going to be a lot of fun eating. I don't know about you. I'm looking forward to the spread Thursday that my family will be having, and I'm sure you will be as well. And looking forward to hanging out on Saturday, enjoying a college football, and probably, eating more food, if I had to guess, knowing us too. I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast or all your various podcast platforms. We're on Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, you name it. The Roy's Boys podcast is there also. Check out the Heel Tough blog website. A lot of good stuff going up there this week football-wise, recapping the home win over Mercer, which was senior day for Carolina football. This Saturday, they're at NC State. They win, they go to a bowl game. If not, they let the Wolfpack beat them for a 4th straight year and knock them out of bowl contention for the 3rd straight year. And, of course, we've got you covered basketball-wise. All things Battle for Atlantis will be on the website with previews, recaps, and, of course, this podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Tar Heels.